All right, and we're live. I am here today with Greg. Is it okay if I call you Greg? I probably should have before we went live.
Call me Greg. There's Greg Gillespie is also big in the hobby, so I try to just promote Chubby Funster so that there's not two Gregs.
Gotcha. So I'm here with Chubby Funster, who is I'm going to say prolific Shadowdark supplement writer, creator, designer. So do you, hey Mike, how are you? Thanks for swinging by. Do you want to begin by introducing yourself?
Yeah, so I started writing role-playing game stuff back in like 2010, 2013 timeframe during the Google Plus days. And I have a big OSR heartbreaker called Ambition and Avarice, and there's a second edition one. And it has a lot of, if you want to go into it, it has a lot of, I think, unique aspects to it. But of course, nowhere near as successful as Shadowdark or anything. And then when Shadowdark came along a couple of years ago, I had gotten to where a lot of creators get this way, where they've done the thing that they wanted to do, and then they're like, I'm going to convert this to OSC. I'm going to convert this to whatever other system so that I can have multiple things going. And I was about to convert some stuff to OSC, and Shadowdark hit. And so I started taking things that I was going to be putting in and putting it into Shadowdark, and it was just extremely successful because the iron was hot. And it's been really great creative journey. I've tried to balance out, get a lot of different things. A lot of people will focus, like they'll create one product and then they'll start creating supplements to add on to that product, and they're really focused on that one thing. And I have tried to spread out, mostly for my benefit, not for people's benefit, but I just get bored. I can't sit there and write over and over and over again with the same limited criteria. So I made an adaptation of Dark Sun into Shadowdark called Shadow Sun, and I made a adaptation of Skyrim I've made supplements for there's a player companion, there's a GM companion. The GM companion actually hit 1,000 sales about an hour before this, and
congratulations!
It's going to update to platinum as soon as TTRPG does their overnight IT. I'm pretty sure, but it still shows as gold, but it has over 1,000. So I was really excited about that. Watching the clock, because it's a big milestone for a product in terms of visibility. So the Shadowdark community has been really great. Produced a lot of stuff. I got to where now I've had quite a few people tell me that, like, whatever comes out, they're interested in. They don't care what it is. Like, if it's from me, that's great. And I'm like, wow, that's really awesome to hear. So it's been an interesting journey to go from kind of being obscure to having, I was at North Texas Con. I had people come up and recognize me for the first time in my life for having done, like, oh my, are you Greg Christopher? And I'm like, yeah. It was strange. So it's been a really great journey. I couldn't be, happier about Shadowdark and all the stuff. I've done some Adventure Conquer King supplements as well. It's just been, fantastic couple of years. Past couple of years have just been great. And I started taking a methylphenidate prescription because my brother's a lawyer, and he told me that he started getting a prescription for adult ADD, and it was just amazing for him. And it really opened up his productivity. And I was like, well, I'll try it. That was like 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago. And since then, I've been able to put out a book almost every 3 months. Amazing level of productivity from taking a medicine that turns me from a absent-minded professor into somebody who can really put it on paper.
Well, that's the 1,000 sales is very exciting. I haven't yet flipped through the GM book that you have created, but I have read through the player companion book, and I have read through Shadow Sun. player book in particular, I found to be incredibly interesting because you did this thing where, treasure is a focus in Shadowdark. It's obviously is a focus in other games. It's how you progress. Character progression is tied into treasure, gives you a reason to go back down into a dungeon to collect treasure, to come up to spend the treasure. But the way that you have implemented your spell augments with a piece of chalk or a lump of copper, you have, I think, landed on a very interesting. It's a treasure analog, right? So there is character progression there in these items because, if I'm casting whatever and I have this consumable item on me because I found it in a dungeon somewhere, it will allow my spell to perform differently. And I found that in particular fascinating because of how innovative it is with regard to the expectations put on treasure. So how did that come about? Is that something that you intended or like what?
That came from Ambition and Avarice 2. Ambition and Avarice 1 was basically a chassis that you could take any generic monster, treasure, whatever from old school stuff. It's all pretty much compatible. And you could run it, and it was just a resolution system essentially. The second edition, I added all sorts of stuff, tons and tons and tons more stuff, like to make it a fully complete game, rather than just here's how I think we could run things. And when I went through that, I really expanded out the equipment section, and a lot of my friends have told me that for years, like they would pitch to people like, you just got to get this book just for the equipment, because it's all interaction. It's geared to interact with basic AD&D, OSE level, Labyrinth Lord, whatever we were using depending on the time frame, and the pricing is correct for all those systems. It works out, and I just add tons and tons and tons of equipment. And one of them was the catalysts, and one of them was the trophies, which is like if you kill a gibberling. I love gibberlings. If you kill a gibberling, if you cut out its tongue, there's like a percent chance of getting it or not. Like you could damage it, whatever. You get it out, and then if you squeeze it, any hostile creature within a certain radius, I think it is, starts hearing all the gibbering in its head, and it can't focus. So you can use it to like disrupt wizards and cause all kinds of confusion problems by squeezing this little gibberling tongue in your hand. And so I went through for each monster and added all that kind of stuff. There would be a trophy. Then for the catalysts, I think I have more spells in Ambition Avarice 2 than any other OSR chassis. It's tons and tons of spells, all sorts of utility spells in particular. And so I wanted to make it so that you could have a spell that let you do a particular thing, but if you brought the right piece with you, it would boost it. And that was one of the things that I converted over. When I said I was ready, I had all these things that I was going to be ready to convert to other systems. And that just timed out. Expanded equipment was one of my first PDFs for Shadowdark. It was just a PDF. And then I released one for races and classes, and then I combined them into a POD with Player Companion. So for a while, it was just PDF only. And I didn't want to make like 100-page POD. I wanted it to be more substantial. So that kind of thing. But I feel like it adds a ton. I'm a big proponent of throwing tons of little stuff out for the players to have to choose from. So you go into the mine, and there's a pickaxe, and there's a basket that you could use to carry more gear, but you have to use up a hand in order to hold the basket. There's copper nuggets that might improve a particular spell. There's a pair of snowshoes that somebody left by the entrance, but you could maybe use those at a different location. So should you take them with you or leave you? All kinds of little things like that for the GM to put out there as treasure, because I don't know about you, but I just get tired of finding 20 gold piece gem, 30 gold piece gem, whatever. People don't even care what it is. They're like, oh, it's a 30 gold piece gem, and put it in my pocket. But if you give them a piece of equipment worth 30 gold pieces, there's like a psychological difference there. Like the difference between getting a gemstone worth 30 gold pieces and a 30 gold piece item that has utility is big. And
Yeah, this is it's a design philosophy. Pardon me for
no
interrupting, but
problem.
it's a design philosophy that um, has been explored in video games. I have a lot of experience with World of Warcraft, and so I'll bring this up. But there used to be talent trees where there were these just flat, vanilla percent increases to damage, increases to critical, and it's those are the ones that you have to take because you're not as good as everyone else if you don't take them. But they're so boring. It's just a bigger number and no one cares. But if you can give someone a choice between different types of utility, that becomes very interesting. It will change the way that they play the game because they now have this new item or this piece of equipment in tow. I think it's a very intelligent way to go about, especially with things like equipment or catalysts. I think that it's pretty brilliant just to puff you up a little bit. I love the player companion. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think it's essential to anyone who wants to play Shadowdark. I have a link in the description, by the way. If anyone's interested in exploring any of the publications that we talk about today, there's a link directly to Chubby Funster's Drive-Through RPG storefront. And I would highly recommend that you pick up the player companion in particular, but also Shadow Sun is great. And we'll, I'm sure, get into that later.
No problem. Yeah, I appreciate it. I think, like I said, I think it's a different way of playing. Like there's people who want to play and they want to do everything by powers, right? And I think a big part of the OSR philosophy is not doing everything by powers. And I think some people don't go far enough. I think they don't put out enough equipment. They don't put out enough NPCs even. If you're only introducing if the players go into a town of 1,500 people and they meet 3 people, like, what are their options there, right? Like, adding more and more and more and more things for them to interact with creates combinations. I talked to this guy, and he's a fisherman, and I found out that he's been going up the coast, and there's been bugbears up there. And then I talked to this guy, and he told me blah, blah, blah. Now I can make a choice. Do I want to go fight the bugbears? That's a big Quantum Ogre is a huge thing for me. That was a major impact on me when I read that blog post for the first time. If anybody doesn't know, you just Google up Quantum Ogre. There's a blog by Courtney Campbell about what it is. And I think it's an enormously important part of old school play to avoid Quantum Ogres. I have friends who are considered pillars of OSR community, like Eric Tenkar, for example, who will disagree with me on this on a lot of stuff, but he's okay with Quantum Ogre in certain circumstances. But the basic principle is that if you don't give the players a choice between 2 options that they understand, they have to understand the choice that they're making, then it's not a real choice. So if you have a choice between going on road A or road B, and you don't know anything about what lies down those roads, then the choice is meaningless to you. And that's why moving the ogre from one road to the other, depending on which one they pick, is a futile exercise. The game the players are just along for the ride. They're not in charge of the ride.
Yes.
So I released a setting for ANA 2, and then I converted it to Shadowdark. It was released in March of this year, I think, called Terra Invictus. And a huge focus of this setting is rumors and information. So when you go into the starting towns have D20 rumor tables to give, every player rolls out 1 rumor. So they're right away going to have 5 or 6 rumors of potential things to go do. And then every time they go into a small town, there's D6 rumor tables all over the place, and they're constantly bringing up one of the complaints I got from Joe the lawyer. Has Joe's Analog Man Cave is his YouTube channel, but he was a blogger for a long time under Joe the lawyer. He would complain when we were doing the playtest that he's got too much information. He's like, there's a pyramid over there, and we know that there's been Aarakocra attacks over here, and there's a giant eagle over that way, and he's like, I don't know what to do. There's too many things to do. I'm like, that to me is a much better problem than not knowing which way to go at all, not having any idea. And I think building in tons of choice like that, where the players are able to decide, like, I want to do this. I'm in charge of my fate in some respect. You have to do that by broadcasting information to them ahead of time, and people just are lazy and they don't do it.
I completely agree with you. I agree with you on the Quantum Ogre. I agree with you on presenting options. The more options, the better, because that provides meaningful choice to the players. And the game is supposed to present those interesting choices. And if you're not doing that, if it's like you said, if it's a matter of, choosing between road A or road B, and the same bandits or the same ogre is going to show up on the road regardless of which one you pick, it's not a choice. It's not meaningful. And for as much as people who think that this is okay say that it's okay, players know. Like, you are going to have someone figure out the fact that it didn't matter what they chose. They were going to run up against this thing anyway.
That's right. Eventually, they stop caring about making choices because
exactly. Yes. It becomes, once a game becomes, and I approached this topic a tiny bit in the video from last week. Once it becomes theatrical, where they're just going through the paces and it's just purely demonstrative, has nothing to do with actual choice, they will lose interest, they will get bored, and they will stop playing.
Yep. I just ran session 1 on Saturday night, like a couple days ago. I have a Saturday night game that plays every week, and we just started Gods of the Forbidden North.
Cool.
And it's fantastic. It's a fantastic setting, but some of the guys had a little bit of experience. They read a little bit of the book, and I didn't want them to have any kind of metagame knowledge. So I led with a totally different setup than the kind of built-in adventure that you're supposed to lead. There's this really great startup, by Rob. I always want to say Rob Conley, but it's Rob Alderman. But Rob has kind of like a video game type narrative thing where the players go through a series of interactions on the boat coming in, like almost like Morrowind. It really reminds me of Morrowind. And they like, what are you? And then they pick whether they're, what race they are. They pick their gender. They pick different stuff like that. But they don't build the whole character at that moment. Yeah, they go through some stuff, and then they move forward, and then they're like, we need this paperwork to complete what's this, and then they make a few more choices, and it goes through like that. And I think that's really great. So I didn't sidestep that because I don't like it. That's why I'm going through that. But I didn't want to follow the kind of set piece that had been set up to introduce people in. So I created an alternative where they were basically smuggled in rather than going through the normal immigration process, essentially. And it was kind of like being a Stormcloak instead of being an Imperial in Skyrim. So like they're coming in on the down low, sneaking in. And I told them, like, as soon as they got to a point where they could when they're at sea, they couldn't do it. So like, but like you're in the setting now. I'm like, if you guys want to turn and just murder this guy, that's up to you. Like, I'm prepared for that. But if you follow him through a few more set pieces, I can open up some more of the setting to you. And I'm like, I'm still going to let you go. So we went through that, and they followed along with the guy, and I got them, he wanted them to transport they were bodyguards for him down a road to his home village. And I had him transport him most of the way there. And then there was an ambush that kills him. And so it opens up. I'm like, okay, so you're in country, you're deep in country now. So you're not like right on the edge in the city anymore. It's a hex map. You have all these hexes that are open. You're in between the two factions. So you can pick either faction that you want to double down on, you can. I had already given them some rumors about stuff that was going on. They knew of other towns nearby that they could go to. And I was like, it's up to you now. It's up to you. Like, I'm not going to be leading you by the nose. And they know that in that book, I'm going to have every hex that they go into. I can make random encounter rolls if there's nothing there. If there is something there, it's already decided. So it's not going to just be made up like you went 2 hexes into the woods and that's where you ran into the dwarf group. Like, no, like the dwarf group is in the woods if you go in there or not. Like, it doesn't matter to me. And so I think that is the best way to play from a player satisfaction, player unless you have a group of people who really just want to observe you doing things. In that case, I think watch TV. That's fine. Like, go watch movies. But if you want to play in an RPG and you want to make serious choices, I think you have to dump players in their own choices and say, yeah, this is for you to handle. It's not for me to give you advice on which way to go. They had 10 different possible vectors they could have gone in from where I dropped them. And I was like, it's on you guys. So now they're discussing things over the week. And then when we go in on Saturday, they're going to have to take charge of their own life.
Yeah. Proactive players with their own goals, with, characters with goals that want to forward those goals and aren't going to sort of just sit down and wait for things to happen to them or around them. They want to make those things happen themselves.
Yeah. And that's why I think almost everything that I see posted by Critical Role people, Daggerheart stuff, or 5th editions, a lot, like, it's people are getting led around by the nose.
Yes.
And I think it sucks. That's my biggest philosophical difference with these people. And I was really, really happy to see Kelsey say that she was going in the direction of West Marches and to open up the Western Reaches Kickstarter. And I've already begun putting together material to go as like I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, but basically like the player companion kind of stuff for Western Reaches.
That's cool.
With a bunch of I've already expanded the equipment tables even further than what's in player companion. And I've put together ideas for, like, I want to create lists of all the spells that are available and do catalysts for all of them. Like we were talking earlier, I want to do trophies for the monsters that are going to be there. I want to do that stuff to support that kind of play. So, yes, it's what I like, but it's also like, I think this is a worthwhile way of promoting. I think it's important to teach new players, to teach old dogs new tricks, to put it on, show people how it is when you play in that style. And we haven't talked about it yet. We can kind of a little here. My next big project is converting a kind of the World of Darkness, not exactly, but a vampire setting for Shadowdark. So it's, instead of playing in the way that you're used to playing vampire, which I think a lot of old school people do not like, and that's why they have such a negative feeling towards vampire. I think there's actually a lot of people who really like the World of Darkness setting. They just don't like the kind of people that play, or the kind of way that the game flows, and adapting that to Shadowdark so it's a fast-paced, brutal location crawler. You're going into this location, you're exploring it like a dungeon. If you go around the corner and you run into this or that thing, you could be dead. And I'm down to the last 2 pages as of today. So, yeah, to answer Stochastic Agency, this is going to be even more. So this is just building on what and the player companion is really designed to be used with core Shadowdark, right? The Western Reaches is changing a lot of stuff, so it's gonna she's bringing in her own all sorts of classes from the Cursed Scrolls, so you won't really need a lot of the class support that's in player companion if you're playing in Western Reaches, but it will still have a ton of even more equipment, even more stuff, so it will just keep my goal is to just keep making it better and better and better, for whatever it is. With my kind of shtick as a whole is providing, if somebody does a D12 table, and I'm going to do a D20 table with all different options. And that's, the GM book is the same thing. The GM book takes all these tables that are in the core Shadowdark book and just blows them out to be even bigger, or all alternates. So like there's already a D20 for naming your tavern, a D20 table. I didn't make it a D100 table. But I made a totally different D20 table. So you now have 2 D20 tables that you can use to name taverns. So that's the kind of focus that I have, is on coming up with a lot more options for people to add to their experience. There's one of the reasons why I did Shadowrim the way that I did was because people were saying there's no way to run a long-term campaign in Shadowdark, and I was like, here you go. Here's a map. Looks very close to Skyrim, and all these hexes are keyed, and you can move around, and you could run a full game. Months and months of sessions on running it in Skyrim. So the idea that you can't run Shadowdark long term, I think, is BS. I played a 6-month campaign just within the last 12 months. So it's, we had a great time. So
yeah, I think if you're careful enough, you can get there. It's pretty brutal.
It is. There was a lot of deaths. I started with a level 1 thief that had 1 hit point. He was the only one that survived an encounter that wiped out everybody else but me. And I carried back all of their most valuable stuff to town, and I leveled up to level 2. And then I caroused, and I met my new party, and then we went back out there. As long as one person makes it, you can keep going. It takes 2 seconds to make a character. You just go on the Shadow Darkling's website and click "Give me a character," and boom, it's done. So I mean, it's a fantastic chassis for beer and pretzels games. It's a fantastic chassis for long term, in my experience.
So I want to ask about, because you commented when I asked you to come on, you mentioned that, I tend toward the more deep topics with regard to role-playing games, and you were excited to see the questions that I had to ask. And I don't know if this question is going to land well. However, I'm going to ask it anyway. So you're converting Vampire now for Shadowdark.
Yep. And
you've done Dark Sun. And I think that there's probably a little bit of sort of, there's a dark underpinning to Skyrim with regard to, the Return of the Dragons, potential apocalypse and whatnot. What's the appeal of the darker theme? Like, is it just because you're writing for Shadowdark and it makes sense to put it in Shadowdark because it's brutal, and so the more brutal settings make sense? Or is it something that appeals to you as a player? Like, is there even anything behind that, or am I picking up on something that's not there?
I think there might be something there. My class spread for Ambition and Avarice is all people that were like outsiders, people who are they're not necromancers, but they're kind of doing questionable things. They're on the edge of society, And those are the kind of people that I think would be going into dungeons. You know, it's a dirty, risky work. Um, and I always just found it kind of unrealistic that everybody is motivated by these good intents, but the way to level up is by getting a bunch of gold and killing things. You know, I think if the way to get better at stuff is to steal the treasure and kill the creatures that have it, then the people who are going to be drawn to that are going to be kind of shady people in some respect. And occasionally you're going to get some real crusader type, you know, no doubt. But I think overwhelmingly the people who would be going out and going into these places to try to get, they're going to be greedy, motivated people, not loving and caring people. And I think that goes with Dark Sun for sure, Skyrim, and the vampire thing. Yeah, I just don't. Maybe it's I'm adapting to reality of the players rather than it being my personal view. But I just don't think players want to play. There's a, you know who Kathleen Madigan is? She's a female comic. And
sure, I the name rings a bell, but
she's a rough talking Irish woman.
Okay.
And so she talks about how, well, she's from Missouri, but very Scotch Irish. Okay, but she's talking about video games, and she's like, it seems like the worse the video game is morally, the better the video game is. So like, she used Grand Theft Auto as an example. Like, if you have a game where you can just drive over people and shoot up a town and kill a bunch of hookers and do all this crazy stuff, like that's the game people want to play. And it's like, oh, here's a game where you can save kittens from no, not interested in that game. You know, I want to play the game where I can go be a drug dealer or whatever it is. You know, like people like that. I think there's something about that. And so there's kind of maybe a reinforcing loop there that I think that's what people want to play. Maybe that's the kind of people that I get drawn to or whatever it is. And then that's what I create for. But I'm always trying to create stuff that I like, that I want to play. And so maybe it is something in me, but I think the motivation to go do this stuff is similar to Grand Theft Auto or Red Dead Redemption. It's like you're the shady people. You know, the good people are down at the town hall trying to pass laws about helping widows or whatever. You know, the guy who chases down the deadbeat and lassos him and carries him back to the sheriff's office is a little bit of a shady guy.
Okay, and that's sort of what, like, you appreciate that, and that's what you design toward. Because I guess there's an emergent philosophy there, right? In that the people who are on the outskirts, the people who aren't necessarily morally upstanding or law abiding, are going to be the ones who are going out and you know, doing these things. And then especially with regard to something like Dark Sun that you've converted with the Sorcerer Kings and you know, getting out from under the tyranny of those particular rulers, and how it automatically puts you in the, you know, on the outs. It automatically puts you in the role of an outsider for striving against that, you know, social norm. So that makes sense to me. And then vampire, of course.
I also think we add kind of modern moral principles in places that don't make sense for them to be. The idea that some guy who's living at feudal technology level in Middle Ages is going to have the same moral quandaries about taking slaves or killing a person or doing a particular thing, like, they're just not. That's not reality historically. That's not. There's certain things that we're super sensitive about. This goes like the Dark Sun thing. People are super sensitive about slavery, but they're okay with murdering people. Now, I don't know about other people, but I consider murder to be worse than enslaving people. Like, at least the enslaved person is still alive, but but there's just all of this moral stuff that gets wrapped up in that, and people get on their high horse about, oh, we can't do this and that, and as a result, you don't have good enemies to go after. Like that. If you don't have slavery, then you can't go to the slave compound and kill the slavers and free the slaves.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that so in a fantasy setting, there is a large measure of the externalization of the hero's psyche into the world around them. And so that's why you can encounter something like an evil culture or an entirely evil race of beings, whether it's drow or what have you. And so, the externalization isn't those people who are evil. The externalization is the behavior. They're slavers, they're murderers, they're betrayers. And so those are the qualities that you are sort of, in a philosophical sense, attempting to escape through your acts of heroism. And I would say that it's likely necessary in the vast majority of settings to really achieve a level of heroism, to be able to confront those things and overcome them through whatever it is, combat or whatever decisions the players are making. So I certainly agree with you.
Well, I think one of the ways that you can see what people really think is by looking at their choices in video games where they are offered one. And there's a ton of video games where you roll up to some civilian, innocent person, whatever, and there's like a normal outcome of, hey, you rescued the guy, you did the thing, here's 100 gold pieces, $100, whatever the setting is. And then there's like an evil option to like shake them down for more money, right? We see this all the time in video games.
Yes.
There's a whole bunch of people who have just finished doing all kinds of terrible things, and they're like, nah, I don't want to be mean to this guy. They don't like clicking on that button. And I personally had a real experience with this with the first Outer Worlds video game. I did a playthrough where I was the goody two shoes decision for everything, and my son, he was like 10 at the time. He thought it was awesome. He loved Star Wars. There's all kinds of stuff in there. We did, fighting aliens and everything. He thought it was great. Then I said, okay, I'm going to start over and I'm going to do the bad guy options. And the more bad guy options I took, he started getting really upset with me. He was like, you can't talk to Phineas like that. You need to be nice to Phineas. He helps us in the other, because he was thinking about the Phineas from the good guy playthrough, right? So like it was really upsetting to him to be mean to an imaginary character, and I'm like, we're not the same person that went through the good guy playthrough. But it really upset him, and I eventually stopped playing because I didn't want him to get upset. But that's the kind of thing, like people will say, I'll have all the, we can't have this in the game and all this stuff. But if it wasn't there, you couldn't choose to not do it. So when you show up and they say, here's the 100 gold pieces, and you say, I'm not going to ask this person for more money, that's the good thing that you're doing. That's the good, like, you're making a choice, because it's just a video. You move your mouse up and click on the upper button and you get a different and it's not real people, but you can't bring yourself to click on that button because you don't want to be mean to this imaginary person. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, you have to have those options, or else you won't be making any decisions.
I agree. I think that the decision of allowing the player the option to shake the guy down for more money or whatever is there. If you don't have that option, then there is no good act, because you haven't chosen anything. The guy just, here's your bag of money and away you go. That's an entirely neutral experience. You didn't choose to do anything except to talk to him to complete the quest. The fact that there's an option there to be worse it makes the choice not to do that the better choice if you're having a moral playthrough. And it's funny that you bring this up, because I am one of those people who has a just rotten time trying to be mean to fake people in video games.
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
People don't like it.
Yeah. Like I will. My wife also plays video games, and I will get on her incessantly for killing dogs in video games. Like, I see you're killing another dog. You just love killing those dogs. And it's just it's a silly little joke that we have, but there is something real behind it, right? Like it is a personality type where you're able to sort of embody that individual. And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong or good or bad. It's just different. And she has the capability to do that. And man, you have to catch me on the right day in a really bad mood to be able to tell someone in a video game that I'm going to kill them for no reason or whatever. I just have a hard time doing it.
Yeah.
So I absolutely get what you're talking about. It is very real.
But if those options weren't there, and every interaction was just, hey, I finished the quest, and they were like, okay, good, then you're not making any. You're just following commands from somebody else.
Yeah, well, to bring up an example that I brought up earlier, World of Warcraft is like that. There's no choice. You go, you do the thing, you talk to the guy, you get the reward. You go and do the next thing, you talk to the next guy, you get the next reward. It's not. There's no morality there. There's no choice. It's no actual lived experience. It's just following a shopping list.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's crazy to me because some of the best stuff in Evil Dogs.
My wife.
There's some of the best interactions I've had in role-playing games were when people said, "No, we got to kill this guy. This is a bad guy. It's going to cause problems for us to kill this guy. It's going to disrupt things. It's going to cause pain, but killing this guy is worth it. Like, he's a bad guy." And it's an important part of the game. And I don't understand, D&D 2024 is absolutely horrible about this. Like, all the monsters are friendly even. It's like, well, why do we even have problems with them then? Why are you going into their place and fighting them? Well, I think it was a thing for Daggerheart, I think, but it was a sample adventure where there was like a diner in the dungeon. I can't remember. It was like a month ago now, but I was like, in what world are these people who are coming out? If you think orcs are people, first off, let's establish that. Like, if you think these things are people and they're coming out and murdering your townsfolk and taking your stuff, then why would you go into their dungeon and then take a break from killing them to eat in the diner with them? Like, the diner would only exist in a society with order and stability. It wouldn't exist in a dungeon. Like, it doesn't even make sense. And I made a tweet about it, and it was mildly controversial, but it's just like, I don't understand what these people think evil is, what it's about, what standing up to it would be. I just don't know. Like, to go back to the Gods of the Forbidden North example, in that setting, there's like an Inuit type native group, and there's a Roman type colonial group. And the Romans aren't good. They're there to create their culture in this place. The Inuit people aren't good. They have their own tribal problem. They want to kill the Roman people. Nobody is good, but it's up to the players to be like, this is what I think we should do, and then make a choice. And I don't know. I wouldn't want to play in a game where there was, this is the really good people, and it's you should do everything that they say or whatever. I think a lot of people have this idealized version of reality that's really close to like North Korea, and I don't understand why they want to live in some kind of celestial tyranny where this is the good way. You can't even have thoughts about what else to do. That doesn't make sense to me.
I agree. It doesn't make sense to me either, and especially within the context of a game where meaningful choice is the vehicle. You have to be able to make those decisions. As as distasteful as some might find them, like myself, I don't like being mean in a role playing game or in a video game. I just find it difficult. There have been some games that I've played in, like. We were playing a Fantasy Flight Star Wars Sith game. This is close to a decade ago with friends from where I come from. And I organized a hit with the two. So not all of us were Sith. There were two bounty hunters. And I contracted the two bounty hunters to kill my Sith rival in the party. I apologize to him to this day for doing that. It's so difficult for me to be able to do that sort of thing. But without that choice, without the choice, the capability to do that evil, then there's no real choice. There's no, the good that you do is meaningless. It's just, like I said, it's a shopping list. It's just things that you do to move, your character forward or to go to the next area, to complete those same quests with no choices, to move to the next area. And I think that, it is a failure of game design to not allow for those choices to take place within this particular hobby, because that's really what the game grew up around. That's what it's about. It's about making those meaningful, choices.
Yeah, and I think people, a lot of this stuff is grounded in that they don't have any historical understanding whatsoever about what it would have been like at that time period. Like I see people all the time talk about how terrible some, usually like the Spanish in Latin America, how terrible they were, and I'm like, think about the Aztecs being out, like. They were clearly more terrible. If you lived in Mexico and the Spanish were coming, you'd be like, "Whew, that's good. That's good. No more ripping my heart out." Like the idea that there's like some perfect option at any particular time period that's way better than everything else perfectly magically. That's not reality. Like if you
and everything's criticizable, right? Like depending on your perspective, everything's criticizable.
If you went back to 1200. You would think everybody was a monster by your modern standards. I mean, there'd be no country where you're like, this is the good country in 1200. That's just the way it is. And if you're living in a world where orcs are attacking people and murdering them and taking all this stuff, like the idea that you wouldn't want to kill them is ludicrous. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I'm with you.
But I think that's one of the reasons why I did Shadow Sun, was because I felt like there's no way Wizards of the Coast will ever redo it in a way that doesn't totally destroy whatever it was, whatever you think it is. However, whatever Shadow Sun or whatever Dark Sun means to you, if Wizards of the Coast makes another version, it will utterly destroy everything that you liked about the setting. And so I felt like we needed to create alternatives. And I feel this way about a lot of things. I'm working on a similar thing for Al-Qadim that I did for Shadow Sun. It's nowhere near party time, but it is under development. And Wizards of the Coast will never go back and treat those settings with respect and put together what people really liked about them. That there's all sorts of things like on the Al-Qadim book that are basically Arabic culture from the Islamic Golden Age, and that are today unpalatable to the extreme, and they don't want to be associated with it. So I said, rather than just wait for them to destroy it, I'm going to make it in the way that I can adapt enough of it that I'm not stepping on their IP, and I can just move forward from there. I don't have to wait for them to destroy the thing that I like. And I feel the same. I feel the same way about Al Qadim. That's why I'm working on a setting that will do that. Yeah, dwarves baking cookies is not a Chubby Funster experience.
We will not find that in a Chubby Funster
Right.
supplement or setting.
Yeah, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of how terrible WotC is, but it just boggles my mind that it's like it'd be like if McDonald's came out and said that the original founders of McDonald's were terrible people and everybody was terrible. You know, Ray Kroc is terrible and the original McDonald's brothers were terrible and everybody is terrible back then. And so we're going to change everything now. So it's no longer terrible. Like what business would do that? Like it boggles my mind. I don't know. Like it's like they don't want it to succeed. What are they even doing? Why are you working on projects that you don't like? I don't get it. Yeah, I don't want gender identity paint on Dark Sun for sure. They then. Yes.
So where to go from here? What's the next thing you have that'll be coming out? I guess is that like what are you working on? Is there anything that you're ready to talk about?
I'm working on this vampire game that's almost done.
Okay, so that'll be it.
Yeah, that's like I said, like 2 pages away from being done.
Mm-hmm.
The main barrier to me starting it right now is that I have to get all my Kickstarter ducks in a row. And it's going to be the first thing that I'm going to do as a Kickstarter. I'm going to fulfill it through drive-through, but it's going to be Kickstarter will let it get more reach and more shareability, so to speak, and get that out there. And then I have an adaptation of Al Qadim that here I can pull up the map here and share it. I do almost everything map first because it helped, I think, visually, I guess, in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So let me see here. Share screen. So it's called Karazim. And
okay, let's do this.
There we go. And this is a huge map. It's 99 by 99 hex grid.
Wow.
And zoom in, and this is like the Mesopotamia right here. This is like the Arabian desert. There's an evil civilization that got wiped out and covered up by the sands that you can explore stuff. This is Savannah. This is a cloud forest, like a lot of the Andes, northern Andes mountains. There's kind of the Arabian Islands, Red Sea type stuff. This is more like Syria. This is kind of a Greek Anatolia section. And then there's a Caspian Sea equivalent and a bunch of Turks that live up here. So this whole very long development on this. This has been made for 6 months. I just writing and doing things. I do everything in layout and bits and pieces at a time. So I'll work on a page and then I'll move down to another page and I'll get distracted and go over to the vampire thing. So I try to develop in the way that my brain works, and that is not linearly. So I make all the layout first, the maps and everything first, and things are kind of conceptual in an outline. And so I'll make a page for every class and have all the frames in place, but it's not developed, just the concepts are there. And then on the day when I'm feeling inspired to write a particular class, I'll go into the layout and I'll write that. And then the next day I might spend on magic items. I might spend on cultural descriptions of an area, whatever it is. I just move around, and then I move between projects. I work on the vampire project. I work on this project, and I just go around because I just can't stay focused on one thing for too long without getting bored. And like the vampire project has been in bits and pieces development for a long time. I had it at North Texas. Mostly there, I had ordered some proofs before, like a lot of the encounter tables were missing entries and stuff, but it was mostly there. And I showed it around to people at North Texas that like the Black Lodge guys and a few people, Gary and yep, there he is, Gary Lewis. He's very excited about it. He wants me to finish it up so I can adapt it also to Red Dead Redemption, which is his big passion. I think the system that I've developed works for both. Doing things modern is very different than medieval, and Red Dead is a lot more. People think of it as historical, but it's really close to modern times. People don't realize that. Yeah, like the difference between 1100 and 1300 is the same as between 1850 and 2050. Like it's same 200 year. It's very, very close to today. And coming up with things like how to do cover and suppressing fire and all kinds of mechanical things within the Shadowdark chassis. That took time. It was a big lift for me because I'm so used to doing things in a medieval way. I haven't written a lot of modern stuff. But they get going through those things, making sure it works. I'm a big XCOM fan, so there's kind of ideas that I drew from how to do combat where you have firearms from kind of an XCOM standpoint of that you could be firing suppressing fire at this guy and it would impair his ability to shoot it at you, or you could do grenades in a particular way and so on. So that's kind of been put together, and it's really the thing that's been holding it up getting finalized has been treasure tables. It's very hard to come up with a lot of high-end treasure. Like if you think about what portable items could you have today in this vampire game set in the 80s, but today works just the same, that are between $5,000 and $10,000 that you could be carrying on your person. Like that's a hard list to come up with. It's high-end technology stuff, rare art objects, jewelry, stuff like that. Coming up with that was been a little bit of a grind here at the end, but it's all, like I said, it's almost done, and really looking forward to rolling it out. There's kind of a psychological release of getting it getting the thing finally finished. I can't wait. It's just going to be all right. It's done. Woo! Walk away.
Get it off your desk.
Man.
So I only plan to take an hour of your time, and we're nearing that hour. But before we go, can I ask what tools you use, like for design and layout? Like, what did you make the map in? Do you use Affinity? Do you use InDesign? Like, what do you do?
I do all my map work in Photoshop. And I use a rendering technique that I learned over 10 years ago, which is basically you create there's a cloud render function in Photoshop that creates random white and black patterns that look like clouds. And if you can use that function to give you basically randomly shaped texturable shapes. So if you put those things together, I have a little image that I share around. Let me see if I can. I can give it to you and put it in the show notes.
Okay.
But basically, you create like a random shape, and then you're layering the textures on. So let me actually. I'll pick a smaller map that'll be easier to load. Well, yeah, I'll just do the Carzen map. It's fine. So it's just going to take a second for the Photoshop file to open up.
No worries.
You create like, so you have like a continental shape, and then you create this cloud function on top of it, and you delete one of the colors, like black, whatever, and then that gives you this random shape. And it's basically a noise map, okay? And then you texture that noise map to whatever you need. Like you want to add some mountain, you want to add some kind of hills to the grassland, whatever it is that you want to do. And okay, let me share this. So this is the Garzim map. So we'll go down to 100. Right. So if you go into the, I guess I had already flattened it here. Darn. So you could turn on, like you have layers, you just turn on and off layers, right? Mm-hmm. But you can see, like, you see how in this grassland, there's these texturable shapes in here.
Yeah.
Right? That's what's being textured. You know, you can see it in the water, you can see it in everything. So it's just a matter of kind of, you craft these layers, and this layer has more like a kind of feels like farmland from a satellite view. And then this kind of striping effect here, it looks kind of like more like hills. And there's just different shapes and effects. You know, these are textured to look like mountains. And you just layer them on top of each other until you get a particular feel. So let me, I can actually pull up. Where's the...
Do you want me to bring you down while you look, or are you okay with?
Yeah, I'll shut it off. I just want to give a good example of the one. Oh, I can use the one that I made for, I made this as a potential for Adventure Conquer King. And let me reshare that. And it has all the layers in it. So when I go down, turn off the framing and icons and stuff. And the land layers. So like you see these forests that are on the map, right? So I'm just going to turn them off, right? So all it is a shape that's been textured and then kind of hand crafted with eraser to make it into the shapes that I wanted it to be, right? And then you can change the hills. So turn off the hills. You can change, these are the heavier hills. Turn off the mountains, right? So these layers are being put on there, and I just build it. I build it out like that. It's super easy.
That's cool. Yeah.
It just takes time because it's kind of you have to handcraft some of it, but that's the technique. I made a little page on how to do it for anybody that wants to know how to do it.
Oh yeah, if you want to ship that over, I'll put that in the show notes.
And then in InDesign, I'll just pull up the vampire one, which I already had in my. Right, so this is an InDesign file, and you can see this is a very Shadowdarky layout.
Yeah.
Right, and so here I go through this. So at one point, these were empty. This is kind of the equivalent to carousing for vampires. So they choose a focus, which is different from Shadowdark's design for carousing. And then there's an outcome related to their focus. So if their focus was on gaining a new asset, which would be like a asset like a CIA asset, like somebody that they can control and manipulate, that can be the thing that they're spending their time on. And then they make a roll and they gain some XP and they either achieve their focus or fail to achieve their focus, right? And I built, like, at one point, this just had kind of the idea for how grinding would work and a few ideas of how the focus would work. And then just over time, I just built it in. So everything is already built out in layout for a long time. When I go down to the tables for, like, these are the valuables that I have, like, they're just sitting. I'm just waiting for me to fill in more concepts. But like this page is done, right? So Some pages are done, some pages are not. And I just keep building it like that until it's done. I feel like a lot of people try to build things linearly, and then they get stuck on something and they just quit. Right? And that sucks. But I feel like if you just set everything out so that whatever you're inspired to write that day, you can do. That is, to me, the most effective way to work.
Well, I think that's a really solid place to end. I agree. Just to quickly comment on it, I have a template that I use. I like templating. I usually put out a bunch of different pages from the template so that, in the event that I want to grab this format or that format, or I'm working on a table or I'm working on a class or something like that, that seems to be the best way for me to work. And I just copy the page, shift it to where I want it to be, and then start populating it. So I try to have a system, and it seems to work for me.
We were talking before the show about your ideas for upcoming stuff. I think you should definitely do it. I encourage everybody. A big part of this hobby is making your own things. That's kind of built into the GM design. And I for years, I bugged my buddy Joe because he had these ideas for a setting. And I was like, if you don't write these ideas down and you get hit by a bus, they're gone, right? But if you would at least just write them down, like even if it's in a format that you don't like, you're unhappy with, but at least it exists, that would be great. Like you don't have to have it be perfect, and yeah, people get so caught up with their perfectionism that it has to be this way. The first book I released was not perfect, by a lot. There's books I just released this year are not perfect. Like it's a long road, and people get hung up on, well, this isn't up to my standard or whatever. And it's like, then you'll never get up to your standard because you aren't practicing, you aren't doing enough to move forward. And at a certain point, you start to see things. I was saying to somebody the other day, like when most people go into a restaurant and they get a menu, they are processing the content of the menu, right? They go to the appetizer section and they're looking at the difference between cheese dip and crab cakes or whatever it is. And that's not what it's like for me anymore at all, because I do so much work in layout that when I go in to look at a restaurant, I pick up the menu and I see 3 tables. The header of each table has a floral pattern with all bolded font that's like this in the center, and then there's 3 columns, and they're putting the price over on this side and the description over here, and it's bold here and italicized here. And I'm stealing ideas from every restaurant I go into about how to do stuff. Like, these guys, but you will never get to the point where you see that level of complexity if you don't start down the first level of complexity, making your own first tables. So
yeah,
people get so caught up on, this needs to be perfect, and it's really disappointing because there's so much creativity out there in our community that when a person takes down their blog or they delete their Twitter account or whatever it is, it just it vaporizes into the ether and it's gone.
Yeah. And to echo what you had just said about, just getting it down, just doing it, right? I had actually held off on starting this channel for the longest time because I thought, I need a setup. I need a ring light. I need a background. I need this. I need that. And really all I needed to do was turn the damn camera on and start talking. And I think that maybe gets lost a little bit. Like, it's okay to start off slow. It's okay to start off rough. Like, a lot of my first videos were about just trying things. I'll try a long form. I'll try a short form. I'll see how this does. I'll see how that does. What does this feel like? What does that feel like? So, it's, yeah, like Mike says, don't let great be the enemy of doing it. Or don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And so it's really just about recording it. Just do it. And hey man, you take notes in life, right? You should. Life is worth note taking, and I think that creativity is a part of that. Creativity it's worth just having a little note app on your phone or a pad of paper and just kind of record things as you go. I am a huge note taker, so I absolutely endorse that particular worldview. I think
I've had a lot of books that started out as a very long outline on my phone, usually on a vacation. So, we're sitting at the beach, we're sitting on the patio or whatever, and I have an idea and I write it down, and then I put the phone down and I look at the ocean or do something, and then I have another idea and I write that down. And the act of writing it down makes you focus and think about, well, how does this concept fit into that concept, and whatever, and then you have to just start organizing it with your brain until it's a real thing. And there's going to be parts where you have to heavy lift yourself. Like if you've got a D10 table and you have 8 ideas for that table, but the last 2 ideas just don't come, they just aren't popping. At some point you have to sit down and really work at writing those last 2 items on the table. Like that's basically the problem that I was having at the end of this vampire book, is coming up with all of these ideas for portable wealth. Beyond I saw Spencer's Grognard, Texas. He suggests the Patek Philippe. Yeah, like I got that, bro. I'm trying to think of even more stuff. Yeah, like all sorts of different ideas. I'm looking at heist movies and think about things that they were stealing. I'm looking at you're just coming up with all kinds of things that people could come up with. It's hard work. There's always going to be some part at the end of the project where you just don't have the motive. It's not coming easily to you. And you have to force yourself through that. Hopefully by writing enough before you get to that point that you can say, I can't just let this die because I can't come up with 3 things to go on this damn table. And then you force yourself to come up with the 3 things to go on the table. That's just how it is. But,
it's funny that you say that, because I'm currently working on a table and I need 3 damn things to cap it off. It's those last 3. I think it's a great table, but those last 3 things that are just, every time I go to do more work, I'll sit there in front of them for a little bit and just think and think and think. And I need to take a page out of your book and just sort of open myself up to what is going on around me. Like, not that I'm going to find what I need on this table from a restaurant menu font, but like that sort of, being receptive to.
Oh yeah.
I think
we have great tools now with the internet for getting into all sorts of things that will help you kind of kickstart. This is kind of my criticism of people using AI, because it doesn't do this. But so let's say that you wanted to come up with ideas I was struggling with for encounters for the vampire game, right? So I went and pulled up the Law and Order thing on, like, I can't remember, Wikipedia or IMDb, whichever one. There's like this easy way of going through all of the summaries of every episode. And some of the summaries are useless, but occasionally they'll give you one where it's not that you're taking the idea from Law and Order, but that reading the thing that was in Law and Order makes you go, oh, I could do it like this, and having the exposure to all that content that's relevant to what it is can help create. It's kind of like the how many ways can you use this paperclip problem. You say, okay, well, in this Law and Order, there was a ambulance that hit a guy, and then somebody came up while the paramedics were helping the victim and stole some narcotic or whatever from out of the back of the ambulance, right? Well, I could have it that the vampires are walking down the street and there's an ambulance coming and a car T-bones the ambulance because they're not paying attention. And now all this shit is happening right in front of them. And then what they do with that is up to them. But the idea of there could be a car that hits an ambulance is what was, reading through that would have come up with it. But if I put into an AI, give me 10 possible encounters for a vampire walking down the street, it's going to not do that. It's going to come up with all kinds of things that are related to you being a vampire, or related to whatever little nuance that you put into your prompt. That's why I don't use AI at all in any of my stuff, because it's like my son. Sometimes he's like, I could help you do this thing, and I'm like, no, every idea you give me is going to be an issue in some way. I'm just going to have to rework it anyway. So I would rather not do that. But I listen to him talk, and sometimes he says something that oh, that would be cool if we did that in Shadowdark. That would be cool. But I'm not prompting him to give me ideas. Is a bad path to follow down. It's the running into all of the possible ideas and letting your brain build the potentiality. If you're trying to write this kind of stuff for Red Dead, you could obviously use Red Dead, but you could use shows like Longmire or whatever, and just go through and find something that happened out in a place where there's very little internet or road access or whatever, and they go, okay, that's something that could happen in Red Dead also, or it'll inspire you to think of something else like that. That's the thing, is constantly be absorbing and reading and trying new role-playing games, trying new video games, watching movies and TV and reading books and everything. Like Stochastic Agency said in the chat, like everything can be a resource. Mm-hmm. You have to just be paying attention. You can't lock yourself in a room and write a role-playing game 100% with what you walked into that room with. You gotta be open to new ideas.
I agree. I echo your I don't know if it's disdain, but I'm going to use that word, disdain, for AI with regard to creativity, because it's just not good enough. And we talked a little bit about where we're employed and what we do, and I so frequently will have to take something that someone has given me and break it down and build it back up. And I would just rather have done it from the start.
That's right.
Yeah, I'd rather get the foundation in there and do it from the start on my own. And I think that, AI is not good for that. It's not like I don't want an idea that I'm going to have to just, like I said, break down and then build it back up from the foundation. But there are times where I would, I'll be watching, and I'm maybe not as receptive to it as you, because I certainly am not looking. I'm going to say it again. I'm not looking at fonts on a restaurant menu, which I think is genius. But there will be times where I'll be just thinking about something. I'm looking out the window at the backyard while I'm drinking coffee or whatever, and something will strike me, and okay, well, I got to go write that down. And I'll write it down, and then you can build from that. Well, what if this, or what if that, or you'll get another idea later on in the day or weeks from then. And so I really think that that AI is not, at least to me and my particular brand of creativity, is not helpful at all. But I think that again, proceeding forward with what you said about playing video games and reading books and just really sort of taking a look at what it is that is around you to fuel that creativity. It's very important and very useful. And I need to become more receptive to it. Not that I'm not, just that I think that there are things I'm overlooking that I need to just be more sensitive to, so that I can incorporate those and receive those inspirations. I think that's really, really rad.
You learn a lot from playing in new games. Like I played at North Texas. I played in Hyperborea. I wasn't part of the regular tournament, but it was basically a tournament style layout where they had multiple GMs that changed over time. So we started out going through like these big bronze doors, and we entered a space that was created by Jeff Talanian, the author of Hyperborea. He was the first GM, and we interacted with this stuff. And I would describe his section of the map as kind of classic sword and sorcery. Obviously, like that's his thing.
Hey, take care, Gary.
See you, Gary. Yep. And So I as I would expect from Jeff Delaney. So then we got through that area, and there was another pair of bronze doors, and we went through that. And the guy who ran the next section, it was basically a puzzle box dungeon. We were in this big puzzle that water was coming in. There was a nautical theme. There were eels in the water that were electrocuting people, and all this kind of stuff. But it was like a classic solve a way to get out of this situation before you die kind of dungeon problem, which was totally different from the way Jeff Delaney ran his section, which was kind of like you can go in any of these directions and there's different problems and random stuff. And then once we got out of that nautical thing, we went through another pair of bronze doors, and this woman ran. It was like a cat thing at first. We thought it was like, okay, there's like a Garfield statue, and then we passed through this, and there was this talking cat that was insisting that we adopt cats that it had in its little area. And then as soon as we passed through this portal, the cats that we had adopted turned into Rakshasa, and it was this brutal fight to the death against these Rakshasa, like 3 Rakshasa against level 1 characters, basically. Like it was tough. We lost a few people, and
that's hyper brutal. That's absolutely.
Yeah, she
awesome.
lured us in with this. It's pretty cats and all this stuff, and then bam, Rakshasa to the face.
Yeah, and punish you for being good. That's so
like going through those things, like everybody brings a little bit of different stuff, and maybe the way you want to play is that puzzle box dungeon, or maybe the way you want to play is the sword and sorcery dungeon. Maybe but at least by playing it in those different ways, you can see yourself in a relative to other things. Oh, I don't do what that guy did, but I do it like that'll at least give you insight into yourself. The whole point is to examine how you enjoy and play role-playing games. And I went to graduate school for political economy, and I had a professor one time who was in a class, and these guys were talking about going to Washington for an internship. And he said, if you really want to learn about U.S. politics, you should go to Japan. And they were like, what? And he was like, when you're in Japan, everything that you thought you knew about America will be up for grabs. Everything that you took for granted, ways that you assumed things would work, all these kind of things, you'll realize there's so many things that you just think are the way Earth is, and they're the way America is. So when you're in Japan, you will really see everything about America that you don't see here. And I'm willing to bet a lot of money those guys never went to Japan, but it definitely is a problem that people have, that they're so myopic in the thing that they do, the thing that they're familiar with, that they don't even realize that what they're doing is a set of characteristics that can be changed if someone else is in charge of the thing.
Yeah.
And it's important to let other people show that to you. You know.
I certainly
went long, but I just it's something I think people take for granted. I want people to play more games.
I agree. I want people to play more games too. All right. I think I have kept you well over the set time. I do appreciate your willingness to stay on long. I appreciate the conversation. Everything. Like I was very excited to conduct this conversation, and I feel like that you delivered quite well. So I really I'm grateful. I'd love to have you on again when the vampire book comes out, or even to talk about Terra Invicta, or I think I said that right.
It's Invictus, but no problem.
Invictus, pardon me.
Terra Invictus.
I'd love to talk about your other books, your other creative endeavors. So I'm play more games. I'm just losing my train of thought for having a very good time here today discussing all this with you. So thank you, Clay. And thank you everyone in chat. I really, really appreciate you all being here, and we'll see you next time. And now I click end stream, and everyone looks at my dumb face for 5 seconds while